The best pass catchers, the best playmakers in the SEC. Next on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All right, we're continuing our top 5 breakdown here in the SEC with Brent Baird from First Coast News and also College Sports Today, breaking down wide receivers and defensive linemen today. Brent, how you doing?
Mark, I'm doing well. Great to be on with you. We have college preseason magazines out since we last talked, which is always a welcome addition with Athlon and Lindy's, Street and Smith, and we've got Phil Steele on the way at some point, so that will be fun. I still think that we will play this year. In what shape, form, fashion that will be remains to be seen. And I know that's discussion on another day, but I think what amazes me is that we're actually having this discussion about wide receivers in the SEC when you go back as a short period of time, Mark, is what, 15, 20, certainly 30 years ago when the SEC was a power running league and your wide receivers were more blockers and guys who did things on third down to get you a first down. So it's really amazing, is it not, Mark, how far the SEC has come at that position.
Yeah, and it's really here, I would say, in the last 5 or 6 years that we've seen, we've saw great talent at the position, but they didn't produce the kind of numbers that we saw starting with the Amari Coopers and Calvin Ridleys, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, those guys, Mike Evans at Texas A&M. And then that's even been taken to another level. And we'll start with your number 1 wide receiver coming back from 2019, and he hails from LSU.
That's right. Jamar Chase would be the guy, 84 catches, over 20 yards per catch, which to me is always the something you really see in a wide receiver, 20 touchdowns. Now, again, Joe Burrow will not be there. Joe Brady will not be there. A lot of that offense that they had last year does not return, but he does. And he is one of the best wide receivers in the SEC, has to be accounted for on every play. So Jamar Chase, Mark, would be my top pick of the top 5.
Most dependent position on the field would be my claim, wide receiver. We love to see what they can do in the open field, high point the football, 50-50 plays downfield, get into the open field with the football in their hands. What can they do in making guys miss? They're electric, but they're so dependent. And to catch 84 balls, you had to have Joe Burrow doing what he did and a passing game coordinator in Joe Brady. They both move on to the NFL. So just Jamar Chase's numbers could suffer after a Biletnikoff award-winning season, but should still be pretty prolific. And again, that's how different people approach these top 5 and top 10 lists. Are they simply who you feel are the 5 best players, regardless of quarterback play and how that impacts the numbers, or are you projecting numbers? So Jamar Chase is also my number 1 guy. 23 catches as a freshman, came back with the 84 that you mentioned and 20 touchdowns for that LSU offense that scored more points than any team in history. All right, number 2, Brent.
Number 2 would be Devonta Smith at Alabama. And I think you made an astute point a moment ago. The guys that we're going to be mentioning here for wide receiver, Mark, I think are guys that frankly could still be all-stars regardless of who's throwing them the ball. If one of my 2 cats were throwing them the ball, I still think they can make something out of it. But still, I think Devonta Smith is one of these guys in some ways at times gets lost or got lost last year maybe in with Henry Ruggs and also with Jerry Jeudy, but he more than holds his own, doesn't he? 68 catches, nearly 20 yards per catch, 14 touchdowns. Obviously, some very memorable catches, to say the least, in championship games. But Devonta Smith coming back, that makes it a whole heck of a lot easier for Mac Jones this year, knowing a guy like that's lining up, doesn't it, Mark?
Yeah, you allude to, of course, second and forever in the national championship game in overtime, and him streaking down the left sideline to haul in the game winner and cap off a tremendous Alabama comeback from 2 scores down. Jeudy and Ruggs gone. Obviously, you only have one football. It can only go to one guy at a time. So you would think Devonta Smith would benefit from those subtractions, and he still outpaced Jerry Jeudy in yards per catch and yards and touchdowns last year. All right, as we head down to the 3 slot, maybe some tougher decisions to be made, Brent.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm going with George Pickens from Georgia. I know he's only played a year compared to these first 2 guys that we talked about. But my goodness, and I think it goes way beyond potential. If by the time he leaves Georgia, Mark, could he be one of the best receivers they've ever had? I mean, could he be A.J. Green type before it's over at Georgia? 49 catches, 727 yards. A lot of those maybe one-handed or amazing as far as what he has been able to do. Tremendous recruiting battle between Georgia and Auburn to get him. I'm curious what you think about Pickens, if you were impressed with him as I am. And again, sometimes it may not be fair after 1 year. But Mark, look, there are guys, as long as we've been covering this game, that you see in their first year, and you can see how special they're going to be over the course of their career if they stay healthy.
Oh, I think he's pretty special enough to be on my list at number 3 as well. So we're going stride for stride here. He was your number 1 SEC producer at wide receiver last year, 49 catches, 7 touchdowns, over 700 yards. And then again, we talk about how the factors at the quarterback position and the offensive coordinator slot affect these guys and their numbers. You got Todd Monken coming in at Georgia, new quarterback in Jamie Newman, with not the experience of a Jake Fromm, but at the same time a dual threat guy that may steal some yardage in the running game as a running quarterback. But certainly Georgia fans are, I know, many optimistic and many just waiting impatiently to see what this offense could look like this year, because that seems to be the missing link. Good offensive play, productive offense versus LSU or near LSU kind of offense to push across to a national championship.
Agreed. And look, that's one of the reasons, and we'll sort of get into this as the season gets closer, as to why a lot of the magazines are predicting Florida over Georgia because of the changes that you just talked about a few minutes ago. But if Pickens stays healthy throughout the year, he will have them in that Eastern Division title discussion, Mark.
Okay, let's disagree here at some point, Brent. We'll see. We're unveiling these, so folks, we didn't know what our lists were before we started this whole deal. So we're step for step 1, 2, and 3 SEC wide receivers. Number 4 for you, Brent.
Yeah, this gets harder as it goes down to number 5, but I'm going with Jamin Osborne at Texas A&M. 66 catches, 13 yards per, 5 touchdowns. A&M has always got a tremendous receiver or 2. This is a big kid. He's an easy target for Kellen Mond, and he's the guy. Mark, I think this is a really crucial year for A&M. Do you? I think with the 3rd year for Jimbo, the 3rd year for Mond, they've got to step up. But I'm telling you right now, not a lot of love, Mark, from the magazines for the Aggies, is it? I'm just going to say on average, probably around number 15. They're paying Jimbo $75 million at this point. It makes you wonder how long they will put up with that. And look, we're not saying he's going to be fired. That's not the case, because I would argue that Jimbo's clock just now got started, according to some of the A&M beat writers. But I'm going with Osborne for my for my number 4 guy at this point. I think he's got the potential, and if Mon and he click, that can make them very dangerous. A lot of people think that they may be undefeated coming to Alabama in mid-November. How fascinating would that be?
It would be interesting, because they have certainly gotten stomped by the Tide ever since Johnny Manziel left campus. Courtney Davis, Kendrick Rogers, 2 prolific wide receivers, or productive wide receivers, I should say more accurately, leaving campus. So more throws for Jamon Osborne after, as you mentioned, 66 catches. But this is the first disagreement we have. Osborne not making my top 5. I got Jalen Waddell only caught 33 passes for the tie, but 17 per catch. And again, a very crowded wide receiver core at Alabama, caught 45 and 7 touchdowns 2 years ago. And again, with no Ruggs, with no Judy, there should be more opportunities for Jalen Waddell. All right, let's close out the top 5, Brent.
Well, Waddle would be mine. That's coming up next. I think the thing that with Waddle is Waddle reminds me of former SEC athletes. And my point with this is when Herschel Walker or Bo Jackson or guys of that ilk got the ball, they could go the distance on any play. And I think that's the way it is with Waddle. Mark, I think what we saw with Waddle at Auburn, he returned the kickoff. What he did was getting in space. He was absolutely unstoppable. Waddle and Anthony Schwartz of Auburn, to me, are similar to each other as far as their speed is concerned. But I'm telling you, Waddle could very easily end up being a Heisman Trophy candidate because he'll be a dual threat. They can line him up in the slot. He could return kicks. Listen, Mark, they can line him up at tailback, pitch him the ball, get him around the corner. You get a block, and this kid is gone. But I'm absolutely convinced if the Bama defense were able to get the ball back at the end of that Auburn game, even after missing that kick, with Waddle and the kind of day that he was having, they may have won that game.
I'm looking at number 5 and Terrace Marshall, the other wide receiver at LSU, produced 13 touchdowns on 46 catches for that prolific offense. He's coming into his junior season. And then there's a host of guys that deserve some mention here. You got a couple guys coming off productive freshman seasons that give Arkansas some hope in Treylon Burks and Trey Knox. They both got 29 passes last year, and with some better quarterback play from Felipe Franks, maybe they can produce more. Lane Kiffin and the way he schemes and matches things up, Elijah Moore could have a huge year for Ole Miss.
Absolutely.
Didn't necessarily conclude 2019 in the best of ways in the end zone in Starkville. But get these numbers, Brent. Elijah Moore caught 67 passes last year. The other 7 wide receivers at Ole Miss caught 55. He also outgained them and also caught more touchdowns, 6-2, than the other 7 wide receivers. And again, with Lane Kiffin, and he loves to experiment and mix and match. He wants to get him open, that's for sure.
Mark, I would say to go along with some of that bunch, I'll put Shi Smith from South Carolina in that bunch too. 43 catches, nearly 500 yards. If Helinski is on target with him this year, that could certainly be exciting. From Florida, Travion Grimes comes back. And listen, I know he's a tight end, but I'll make the argument that Kyle Pitts is more receiver than he is a tight end. And he's one of the more exciting players I think you can see anywhere along that line. I agree totally with Elijah Moore. The incident in the end zone, I think, took away a lot of notice on him about how good he really is. And I think he'll get back on top at Ole Miss and have another good year. I'm going to throw Seth Williams in there, Mark, with Auburn. I think this is a guy who's got great size. And look, let's be honest, these Auburn receivers were disappointing last year. If they're going to go up another notch, and Bo Nix is going to be joining them, I think this is a guy that's going to be able to step it up. He and Anthony Schwartz, for them to get going, Schwartz actually a track star along that line. But listen, I'm with you. Some of these guys we've mentioned post top 5, you can make a great argument for some of these guys being in the top 5, frankly.
Yeah, I definitely respect what Bo Nix did as a true freshman in leading that offense against that schedule, coming out of the gate against Oregon, leading a big comeback. But shoot, he was scattershot, and he should be improved. And so Seth Williams, maybe out of 59 catches, he gets through a few more thrown in his vicinity and not 10 feet over his head. And he'll be able to reel some of those in. He had 8 touchdowns and could break 1,000 yards after gaining 830 last year. So it's a good bunch, and this is even with Judy and Ruggs leaving Alabama and that host of Florida wide receivers, Swain and Cleveland and Hammond and Jefferson, and then, of course, Justin Jefferson at LSU is now moving on to the NFL.
Well, and this even goes without saying who when we do this at the end of the year, I'll be fascinating to see what not only Lane Kiffin, but Mike Leach is able to do with that receiving core at Mississippi State and what he'll do with KJ Costello. So, and I think Tennessee will develop some guys. Listen, the problem that Mark and I have with this is the league in general. There's so many prospects with this list. And we don't do it intentionally, but you can't help but leave some guys out.
No doubt about that. Always love the conversation with Brent Baird. You can catch him on First Coast News and also College Sports Today. Brent, we appreciate you stopping by. We are going to hit those defensive linemen next.
Look forward to that too.